America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and you're watching The Black Athenians. I come to you live every Friday about this time, and today we're going to talk about the parenting show. I'm going to talk a lot of smack about a lot of different parents, and some people are going to get in their way about this, but Black people know I do it for us. And not enough people do. And a lot of other parents are screwing it up and are training their kids to consume our kids. And I do not like that very much. So I'm going to tell you the truth. Having been a man who has been around a lot of white families, I went to high school with a lot of white people. I went to college with a lot of recent immigrants, actually. I went to Berkeley. And then, which is fascinating. And then I went to grad school at Brandeis, which is a Jewish school. And now I teach classes, and I'm a grad student at UGA, which is, in Georgia. And it's a variety of white kids. It's special. But, and then, suburban Atlanta non-white kids. But I'm going to tell you about American parenting. This was the show I was going to do about the Amazon vote in Alabama, and I do have things to say about that, but that's not going to go on that's still going on until the end of the month, so I'll just do next show about it. I know I just keep pushing it back, but I got heated because I saw Megyn Kelly's interview on Bill Maher, and this is Megyn Kelly. She's about to talk about how, she pulled her kids out of private schools in New York because there was some anti-white stuff going on in the private schools, and somehow the teachers were teaching her little boys that sometimes white kids are not the best kind of kids, and that might be tied to their whiteness. And she's like, oh, how could they do that to 8, 9-year-olds? They shouldn't be talking about race in school, making them anti-white. Look, by 8, 9, your kids, especially Megyn Kelly, because you have to understand that Megyn Kelly is the woman who risked her job dying on the hill that Santa Claus is white. By the time her kids are 8, 9, they're already whole racists, entire racists. Just like they're not able to actualize their racism and classism because she puts them in New York private schools because guess what? The kids know that you put them in New York private schools because you don't want them hobnobbing with the poors. Right? So you've already made your kids classist and racist. I know this because I know 8-year-old white kids. And now you're surprised that the school curriculum might think it's appropriate to kind of inoculate them about that. So I think, I'll be honest, if it were up to me, elementary school curriculum would be, by the time a kid graduates 6th grade, they would already have done 2 reports on their racist family members and the racism of their family. That would be American culture because these things get reproduced. The habits of subordination, the habits of neglect, and the dereliction of duty and responsibility with respect to redressing racial justice gets reproduced generation after generation. And like I said, if you want reparations, if you, like me, want reparations, we're going to have to actually take control of the cultural institutions that form these white kids because they're malforming them into sociopaths who are very comfortable with Black degradation. And I'm going to come after the immigrants after you go after the white kids. But let's talk about Megyn Kelly. Let's talk about Megyn Kelly saying that she had to pull her kids from her little white boys from public schools or private schools actually in New York because they were taught that being white wasn't necessarily about being right.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about the schools because I really just wanted you back here because I read this, that you took your kids out of the school in New York, and I have been hearing anecdotally very much the same thing from many parents. Parents confide in me, I guess, because I don't have kids. It usually starts with, you're so lucky you don't have kids. And then I hear about their problems. But just tell us why, basically, you did this.
Yeah. Well, we loved our schools. We were in the New York City private school system. Our boys went to an all-boys school and our daughter to an all-girls school. Love our teachers, love the students and the faculty and the parents. And they were definitely leftists. I mean, we're more center-right, but that was fine. My whole family are Democrats. It wasn't like I was bothered by the fact that they leaned a bit left. But then they went hard left. Then they started to take a really hard turn towards social justice stuff. And at our boys' school in particular, it started with when our son was in 3rd grade, they unleashed a 3-week experimental trans education program on these 8 and 9-year-old boys. And it wasn't about support. It was about, we felt like it was more about trying to convince them, like, hey, come on over. And the boys started to get confused, and they had to implement this system where they raise their hand. If you're really confused, put up a 1. If you're just a little confused,
How old are they now?
They were 8 and 9 at the time. And we objected, and so did a lot of other parents, to the point where the school had to apologize for that one, which they very rarely did. Then our kindergartner was told to write a letter to the Cleveland Indians objecting to their mascot. Now, he's 6. Can he learn how to spell Cleveland before we,
Right.
activate him? He lives in New York City. We got buses, we got subways, we got crime. He's got things to worry about other than social activism. And if he's going to be activated, Doug and I should do it, not a kindergarten teacher. Didn't run it by
And
us.
this is what I've heard from parents, and these are all liberal, by the way, people.
Of course,
who say,
on this-
my kids are not ready to be told they're white supremacists.
That's right. And on this,
I'm not ready to be
Can
told
I tell you,
that.
Bill? On
know,
this, we're not left and right. We're not black and white. This is a question of reason and unreason.
But you talked about this letter that the school put out.
So this is on the race issue.
Can I read some of the things that are from this letter,
Yep.
unless people think I'm losing my mind? There's a killer cop sitting in every school where white children learn. White children are left unchecked and unbothered in their homes, one sentence starts. Well, how old do you have to be before you can just be unchecked and unbothered?
Right.
What age do you get bothered? I'm tired of white people reveling in their state-sanctioned depravity, snuffing out black life with no consequences. Go reform white.
Yada, yada, yada. They keep talking. So the idea is that Megyn Kelly thinks that, Bill Maher thinks that the kids are not ready to be told that they're white supremacists. Yes, they are. The kids are absolutely ready to be told they're white supremacists because, once again, by 8 or 9, they are whole white supremacists. And at that school, probably classists too. Right? So, yes, they are. And parents who aren't white supremacists won't really have that big of a problem with it because they will be on board with the school helping inoculate their kids against white supremacy. The kids who are, the parents who are white supremacists will be like, oh, it's too young. I don't want them to feel bad about themselves. They should feel a little bit bad about themselves insofar as so at the time she was 4 years old. We went to a little integrated daycare center. My kid was 4 years old, and one of the kids at the daycare center was told by her mom, the white kid at daycare center was told by her mom not to play with any of the black kids. And so at 4 years old, I had to tell my kid that white people are sick. It's a social disease. It's communicated from parents to children. Not all of them all the time. Your mom has been somewhat inoculated, but a lot of white people are mentally ill, and they're mentally ill in a way that makes them think that they're better than other people. And that is a problem. It's something you're going to have to deal with it. You have to be very careful of these people, and many of them are going to be, some of them are going to be your teachers, unfortunately. So this is me talking to my 4-year-old. So if I have to have that talk with my 4-year-old, you better believe I want institutionalized someone going after Megyn Kelly's kid. Mind you, this is Megyn Kelly, the woman who on Fox, went to bat for Santa Claus being white. That was the hill she was going to die on. They will not make Santa Claus not white. Santa Claus is a fictional character. There are issues with that, but that's how invested she is in whiteness. So you better believe her sons are entire racists. And if any public school any school that's doing its duty is going to go in with that attitude. And she's like, well, if they're going to be socially activated, we want it to be us who activates them and not, no, you're incompetent. We don't trust you to teach them calculus. We don't trust you to teach them chemistry. And we don't trust you to teach them like social justice. You have proven yourself to be incompetent at all of those things. We've taken them. Like, we'll just fill them with like facts and like thought, and maybe you can try to deprogram them, but we're not going to let you program them and reproduce these things like awful America in a vacuum. So a responsible education curriculum goes right at the white supremacy of kindergartners. And look, when you're talking to a kindergartner, it's actually not that hard. You don't need to have like spectacular incidents like Tulsa or Greenwood or anything like that, or like the many riots, New Orleans, Memphis, the many riots where like white people just got mad and started lynching black people. You can just say that like you have to understand that white culture, a lot of it is about control and frailty. So, you know, those kids who bring a ball to the game, but then if you beat them at that game, they take their ball and go home. It's kind of like that, except instead of taking their ball and going home, they will shoot, starve, or otherwise kill you, right? So shoot, starve, or fire you because you made them feel some sort of way, right? So that's the form of white terrorism. And like, honestly, I don't know how old you have to be for you to show them this video of Shirley Sherrod. I think this should be American history right here, because this is American history. I'm going to give you Shirley Sherrod, Obama's old, she worked as a deputy secretary in Obama's office before he got nervous and fired her. But like, this is Shirley Sherrod talking about her dad.
Now, your father's killer was never prosecuted.
Never.
What you came to learn after the event was that it did have to do with a dispute over a cow, right?
Yeah, he had cows, and I don't know how we had farmland adjoining each other, and some of his cows had actually gotten in our pasture in 1963. They came to round them up to get them, but there was one they could not round up. He left them there, and then on the morning of March the 14th, 1965, we met him when we were on our way to church. And my father told him, you know, if you come tomorrow, he would get some others to come and help, because they knew this was a problem cow. And but the next morning, when everyone gathered at the pasture, this man started claiming 5 or 6 of our best cows, and my father argued with him. And according to the others, my father said, "We don't have to keep arguing; we'll just go to court." And he was actually going to his truck. The man is still talking. He turned around to say something, and that's when he was shot. Mm.
So, struggles over land are throughout your story. Now,
So I think every 8th grader should watch that clip. Actually, I want to know Shirley Sherrod's youngest sibling. The age of Shirley Sherrod's youngest sibling, and that's the age that everyone in America should be seeing that clip. If Shirley Sherrod's youngest sibling had to deal with that, because she was in high school when this went down, she had younger siblings. And there was a farm, so I bet she had a lot of them. I want to know the age of her youngest sibling, and by that youngest sibling's age, everyone should see that clip. You should show that clip to all of your friends and family. Actually, gather around and watch this. And by the way, if you like the work I'm doing, go ahead and give me go ahead and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month to www.thefunkyacademic.com, because I'm giving all of this away for, for stipends. And like, depending on who you talk to, I'm making myself downright unemployable. So go ahead and kick in and spread the love and send this all around your social media, because I think the people need to know about how these ideas get reproduced. Because I don't think it's genetic. I think it's cultural. These like white parents make racist white kids. like that's like whiteness is reproduced through our institutions, including the family. So you better believe that a real intervention on whiteness is going to intervene on the comfortableness, the comfort with which Megyn Kelly reproduces her idiocy in like these little boys. And and that's going to be a problem for at least me and anyone who has to deal with them, because Megyn Kelly's going to have money. And then like, these are your future bosses and managers. And we need to talk about this, and we need to talk about the interventions in white parenting, because they are not equipped to do this. They are not equipped to socially activate their kids into justice. They are equipped to socially activate their kids into the quality of racial terror that they've been imbibing and entitlement that they've been imbibing for generations. That's what they're qualified in doing. And then they're surprised when their kid ends up, a racist. But we need to talk about, so like I said, by 8 and 9, these kids are already distorted, like little sociopaths, where race is the variable. That's already the entitlement. It's already there. And unless you're serious about getting rid of, kids are already vaguely sociopathic anyway. Like, and they want and they can't do, so they expect other people to do with them. And like white kids are bad about race. And they aren't taught to be better. They're taught to be a little bit more polite about it. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hit the opening and hit you back, because I'll hit you back when I get back.
To the beat, y'all. Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and ain't no feature in your front. To the beat, y'all. Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I paint the White House black and ain't no feature in your front.
All right, so the idea that we can't teach white kids that they are supremacists when they're that young is false, because they're already activated supremacists. Some of it's dormant, but like they've already been pre-programmed. And the idea of that you need to start with anti-racism as early as possible. And not just like, well, all the same, because that's not what they learn. They learn that my parents took me out of this school and put me in this school because I'm better than those guys. If you're going into a gifted class, I wasn't plucked out of gifted. I was one of the kids who was left behind. And I very much got the understanding that I'm one of the kids who's left behind and the smart kids are being plucked out. And so however non-gifted I am, I'm smart enough to actually pick that up. And so is everybody else. So the sorting starts out really early. And unless you're comfortable raising a racist, unless you're comfortable raising an enormous classist, you should applaud the quality of education that points this out immediately and makes white kids uncomfortable with their own family immediately, because their family is incompetent at teaching them some things. We assume that. Their family's not going to teach them, calculus. Their family is not going to teach them like the finer bits of social studies, and that's why they go to school. And also, among the things their family is not going to teach them is how to be an appropriate anti-racist. There was no reason to believe that their parents are skilled in that, in the same reason that there was no reason to believe that their parents are skilled in, the diagramming sentences. So, by the way, I that's another thing I teach my kids. But so I'm deeply in favor of the quality of intervention that actually makes white elementary schools confront the racism of their own, right? And don't otherize it. Make it a problem of somebody over there, or make it a problem of someone in the past, but make it a problem that's in their house. And that it's their job from now on to actively fight against. Because if you don't do that, understand that white supremacy has designs on those children and has already been working its machinations. Left, the default is Megyn Kelly raising a racist. That's the default. And, Megyn Kelly is funny because now she's billing herself as a feminist icon, because it turns out that while she was spewing her nonsense over at Fox, the other guys also spewed their nonsense at Fox and got handsy with her and expected, it turns out that a-holes weren't just a-holes in the ways that she was comfortable with. Their a-holeness like metastasized in the ways that made her uncomfortable. So now she's like she's a gender feminist for women, for the right to be women to be horribly irresponsible journalists while not being harassed by the other horribly irresponsible journalists who are men. So that's Megyn Kelly's thing. And like, I guess feminists are lining up behind her, fighting for the right to also be horribly irresponsible, but not harassed by their male counterparts. That's Megyn Kelly's things. You make $1 zillion on Fox spewing nonsense, and it turns out that your colleagues are a-holes. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You had it. Did she have it coming? That's a hard thing to say, but yeah, she had it coming. She had it coming. Yeah, you work. Like, if I got a job at a country club, a white-only country club, as a server, or an old-time country club as a server, and one of the patrons called me boy, like that's like what I'm signing up for. And let's say I was like an elite. Let's say I was a token black executive at an old-timey country club, and one of the members was a jerk to me. And what like that's what I'm paid for. I'm paid to service jerks. Megyn Kelly was being paid to service jerks. So yeah, she had it coming. I said it. I said what I said. She had it coming. Had she worked for a lefty organization, I would have more sympathy for her. But she worked for patriarchs, supporting white patriarchy, and are surprised when that comes with a variety of sexual entitlement. I don't know what to tell you. This is now this woman is local in Athens. What do you think her kids are like? What do you think her kids are like?
Athens is not Minneapolis. Athens is not Baltimore. Athens is not Atlanta. We do not have systemic racism here. Athens is not Minneapolis.
So I love that clip because I have it on my computer. And this was in response to a bill calling for redress for one of these gentrification or urban renewal projects that happened in the 50s that just like scooted all these an entire black neighborhood away in order for the university to build a dorm. And now the people who survive are calling for redress for the fact that, like, the county took their parents' house. And that woman was a real estate agent saying that there's no systemic racism in Athens, Georgia. Yeah, I do not agree. Athens is one of those small southern towns where, there's a lot of black poverty and a lot of white money, and the families have all been here for generations, so that's not an accident. So, yes, we need the intervention on the white family. We need it immediately, and we need it at every juncture. Starting from kindergarten, I have no problem. I have no problem with it, like telling white kids that they are whole racists starting at kindergarten. That like every day they need to wake up in the mirror and do it like a 12-step program. and work on not being racist for that day. Like that's, and if you start that and work on themselves, I have no problem. And I think the cool white parents aren't going to mind that as like an intervention. And that's the school helping the cool white parents do their job. And the white parents who do mind that are going to be a problem. And if you're worried about the self-esteem of your kids, you're not worried about this. You're worried about the self-esteem of their kids regarding their whiteness. You're not worried about the self-esteem of their kids if they got if they failed the class or like there are other things that you don't care about. How your kid feels bad. If they sass you, you're not worried about self-esteem, their self-esteem then. You're worried you'll smack the heck out of them, or like you won't hesitate to punish them for some other thing, or worried about their self-esteem. You're worried about their self-esteem about being white when race is the variable because you want them to profit from like latent pro white supremacy in America. And then you're surprised when they do that, right? So I wanted to talk about that, and I hope I've clarified that a little bit, that I'm for early intervention because I think the other side has even earlier intervention. But also, it's interesting that we don't really talk about inheritances that much. And when I talk about inheritance, most people think I'm talking about material inheritance. We don't talk about that because, 1 out of every 7 white families is worth $1 million. And it's 1 out of every 45 black families. So when the baby boomers die, there's going to be a lot of white people who are like, I didn't know Papa was so rich. I didn't know. I just thought, especially if they stroke out quickly. If they string it out through, elder care, that a lot of that inheritance is going to go there in the last 5 years. But if they stroke out or have a heart attack, a lot of, white people are going to find out that the white inheritance is a lot of money. So what does that mean? So that inheritance story is a story, but it's not really one I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the other story of cultural inheritance and what that means, and the entitlements and the clannishness that comes with with cultural inheritance, and how careers are really 3 generations. It takes 3 generations to make a career. Let's be honest, black people. 3 generations ago, your parents were, farm workers, and not farm owners, but farm workers, or domestic help, or like not doing otherwise. Like not too many 4 generations ago, that's pretty much the American South. And if you're cherry picking your ancestry, that doesn't count. If you're saying like, no, my one great granddad owned stuff, no, but all the other great grands didn't. All right, so we need to be honest about what it means to be black in America. So if a career takes 3 generations, then it's not an accident that apparently we only do 13 things. I was talking to my one of my white friends, and she's a tenured professor here at UGA, and she's like, look, when I grew up, my mom was of a certain class, and it was just expected that I was going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or, there are only like 3 or 4 things I could do. And being a professor was the one that didn't involve blood or law, so I became a professor. And I want to say a few things about that. I think if I had to become a doctor, I think I could figure out that system. That's not opaque to me. But something like an engineer, if I wanted to become an engineer, I mean, I have the math skills. I could have learned what I could have, but I don't think it would work out. I know a lot of black guys with, computer science degrees who aren't doing so hot because it's not just the degree. It's also like making other engineers comfortable in a way and getting the job. And they're going to be like a lot of other, it's not just a straight line. And I mention engineering because I teach I teach a class at UGA as I'm a doctoral student. And we were talking about generational skills and entitlements last class. And one of the kids was saying that, like, well, my dad's a mechanical engineer, and I study CS, and my brother studies CS, and she was saying, my dad's a mechanical engineer, but that's just, natural, right? He's an engineer, so that's just what we're good at. And then I was like, okay, so tell me about your schooling. And she was like, well, also, from about 7th grade, my parents enrolled me in Kumon, which apparently was like, it came with like a lot of worksheets. I don't know if you guys know about Kumon, but the class had to explain it to me. I'm not really steeped in it, but apparently, starting at preschool even, you get extra math and English worksheets to supplement whatever you're learning in kindergarten. And And so they're always like a few grades ahead, and then you're a few grades ahead in school. So when you go to school, the teacher always are like, "Oh, how smart you are!" And so they treat you like you're God's gift. And she was like, "Yeah, every day. Also, every day during summer, it was expected that like I would do math homework and the Kumon English, but mostly the math, and so I just became ahead and ahead and ahead and ahead. And look, after this year of me homeschooling my kids, my kindergarten is doing long division now just because that's like it's me and I might as well just kind of keep pushing them. And so like the music's pretty good. And so there's a way in which I understand what it means, but you have to understand that the kids I'm talking about at UGA, at the University of Georgia, especially in that class, the non-white ones, the first generation immigrant ones, they're coming here to be like apex predators. They're coming here to feed. They're coming here to get the American dream, which in America, that means stomping on black people, getting a nice, house, McMansion in Johns Creek, and that's a suburb of Atlanta, and doing well for themselves, regardless of what that means for everybody else. And this is how they had the wherewithal to actually escape the nation that they came to the United States to win in, right? And so that American dream doesn't exactly come with an awareness of the American deficit. And the American deficit comes with, like, to the descendants of the slaves. So we're getting the most, there's a joke about tiger parents. But the thing about tiger parents is nobody talks about the prey, what that means for the prey, right? So everybody can't be a tiger. That's like everyone being a princess. I'm not a fan of Disney. I don't think I have a lot of problem with Frozen 2. I think Arendelle should have been wiped out and Anna should have been deposed and it still would have been a happy ending. But the idea that everyone's a tiger parent isn't honest with the fact that tigers eat other people. So black people were prey. Right? They're training their kids to be tiger kids and to feed on us and be comfortable with it. Because that's the American way. They train themselves to be good Americans in that way. So I'm going to show you, and it's a little bit different with white kids. They're training their kids to feed on us in a different way. And it's funny because there are places like Johns Creek in Georgia, probably places in New Jersey, and this is big in Silicon Valley too, where white kids are fleeing first generation Asian kids because they are terrified that their kids are going to be outpaced. It's the same Megyn Kellys of the world, except instead of terrified that little Johnny's going to feel bad because Johnny's going to learn that his parents and uncles and aunts are whole white supremacists, they were scared that little Johnny's going to feel bad because little Johnny's getting their butt kicked by the recent immigrants. So they're weaponizing. There's a certain kind of white flight that's coming out of these suburbs from recent immigrants who, come here for a job on an H-1B visa. And that's a bizarre kind of white flight because they want their kids to be blue blood white, not, doing calculus at in third grade white, not doing calculus in third grade. So that's a whole different weird economy that you're going to start seeing in a few of these enclaves that were white flood, but now are starting to be peopled with more and more recent immigrants who came here for professional class jobs in America. Because you have to understand that the recent immigrants who came here for professional class jobs in America, many of them, they weren't the worst. They are used to treating other people where they come from like garbage. So I don't know. Is my audio okay? I see that there's a problem with Anyway, I'm going to turn your thing down. I'm coming in too hot. So you have to understand that the people who come here, the recent immigrants who come here, they come here from a generation of people who are used to treating their home people on the lower class like garbage. So they come here and they just swap out the bottom caste of their home country for black people. So it's not that big of a deal to switch. And so there are these programs like Kumon that are pretty much grooming them to be apex predators, and which I'm okay with Kumon finally, but in general, I wish we need to have the honest conversation about what generational careers mean. The fact that America is so specialized and that it does take a quality of it takes 3 generations to make a career in a way, and 3 generations to teach your kids how to ignore justice issues. So there are preventable justice issues that these kids are groomed to ignore. Preventable justice issues. The American deficit, that's to black people, they're groomed to ignore. And it takes a lot of grooming to ignore that. It takes generations of grooming to ignore these quality of justice issues. And that's what I want for us to address. And if you're not addressing it in parenting, that means we have to address it as a culture. Because the problem with Megyn Kelly's kids aren't just Megyn Kelly's kids. They're also the kids that I'm going to have to deal with at some sort of level. And when you talk about what's being taught and who, this is like, if your aspiration, if you have to tell some sort of story about how it's Malia Obama's education and pluck and grit that got her this gig working for Netflix, rather than, the fact that her dad is Barack Obama, then you're just lying to yourself and you're lying to her. I don't know if I'm against lying about these kinds of things in all of its form. I'm against lying. So we just need to be honest about what it means that Malia Obama wanted to be a TV writer and she's going to be a TV writer. Because she's gifted as a writer, but most probably because Obama got a Netflix deal, and the recipient of the Netflix deal isn't just Obama himself. It's the entire Obama clan got a Netflix deal, and so they get to ride. What does that mean? It's a pretty good job, right? But that's not the only job that's like that. Look, if I wanted, there's a lot of things I could do. My dad was a paralegal, so he trained me, he was serious about me learning arguments about things and taking that kind of textual study seriously. So it's not an accident that I've been around books most of my life, either working in a bookstore or, in school. I was comfortable around books. If I wanted to be a carpenter, I'd have a problem. I do not come from carpenters. Nobody in my clan was a carpenter. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a paralegal. They split. So pretty much there isn't really much I know how to do except for generationally, except for read a book and be able to rehearse the argument in a clever way. Right? So there are I wouldn't really know how to start. I guess I would have to work on a site for a few years to get, but I didn't even grow up with tools. So there's a lot of things I don't know. And then getting the job. And that's all before you get a contract. Right? And getting a contract is going to be a matter of kissing some white guy's ass. So I'm not going to do that. And so black people, what does this mean? What are you training yourself to be? You want to train your kids to actually do well in life without eating other black people. You want to train your kids to be Fred Hampton. You want to train your kids to actually do well in life without being a predator and without training them to ignore justice issues. Instead, train them to like engage aggressively. Because I noticed a few, like the recent immigrants kids are training their kids to like be apex predators in one way through test scores. And the white kids are training their kids to be predators in another way through blue blood ticks. I remember one of my white students was like, well, my mom wanted me to take golf because she realized on her business trips there were all these guys going on golfing. So she wanted me to take golf. So she enrolled me in golf. Not because she liked golf, but she wanted you to be buddy-buddy with these jerks. Right? There are entire programs, cotillions and manor schools, and that are teaching white kids how to get ahead on the strength of knowing what salad fork to use. And that's a minor virtue. And not only knowing what salad fork to use, judging everyone else based on their knowledge of these things. So there are different ways that people are trying to weaponize cultural tics in order to legitimize why it's okay to treat black people doing the things that black people have done in this country, the necessary things that black people have always done in this country, like trash. And if we can make that implicit cultural education explicit, we could deal with it and justify it. As long as we pretend that that's not what we're doing, as long as we pretend that it doesn't take 3 generations to make a career, then you're just lying. Or as long as you try to pretend that you're going to be the one, you're going to be Donald Glover, or you're going to be Barack Obama, or you're going to be Meghan Markle, as opposed to the black masses who are pretty much slated. Like, look, if I didn't do this, there's a 50-50 chance that I'm just a cashier somewhere. I'd be happy being a cashier. I mean, I did it before, but like, there's a 50-50 chance I would do that because I think it's good work, or I would do something like that because it's honest work, and I would have to take a job that I'm way overqualified for and where I don't have to kiss white butt for, right? Because that's not what I'm going to do with my life. So I'd rather be poor and not kissing white butt, or working class. So that's why I think that like bus drivers and cashiers and sanitation workers should get paid a decent amount of money, because that I need them in my life, and that could be me. So I don't look down on them. I think they should. I think they should get paid $22 an hour. And I think that's what you should teach your kids. One of the kids in my class was telling me that her parents threatened her and bullied her with the prospect since she was 4 years old of working for McDonald's. Right? If you don't learn this extra math through Kumon, you're going to be working for McDonald's. And not only does that stigmatize McDonald's workers in a way that I think is unbecoming, and this is a person who, from time to time, she admitted she likes going to McDonald's. So it turns you into a hypocrite and a snob. And so we have to watch about the habits of snobbery that we reproduce among the populace, and the habits of snobbery that we've normalized. In a world with buses, in a world where we like trash being picked up, we need to actually venerate the people who do that work. And that's the work that keeps America going. Right? So thank you for your time. Don't lie to your kids. And black people, for the black people watching, you can't wait until 8. There is no black person watching who didn't actually have to come to grips with race before 8. Like I think like 4 years old might be too late if you're actually being responsible. Apparently, white kids can take a holiday for a few years and not actually deal with it until, or not actually deal with the ugly end of it until they're 12. They'll just assume that like everything is as it should be, and black degradation is like the scenery through which they thrive their idyllic life. But for black kids, I suspect 5, 6 at the latest, like some parent has had, or someone has treated you crappy because of race, especially if you're in white spaces, right? And you've just had to deal with it and like come to grips with it. And that's just like, so I want to remove the white holiday from white kids. They shouldn't get a holiday from that. Instead, like we need to work on it then, because that's, we need to work on it for them at that age, because I have complete faith that like Megyn Kelly's kids have perpetrated racism, even if they don't understand it yet, because Kelly took her kid away from school that would teach that kind of wisdom. All right. Thank you for your time, and I will see you next week.